I, Yatika, on behalf of Cuts International, welcome everyone on our virtual webinar on future of work in India, how and why and how labor and technology can gainfully coexist. So before we dive deep into our exciting sessions, just setting out some household announcements. Today's sessions will be 2 hour long. The session will begin with Mr. Pradeep Mehta's opening remarks. The panel discussion will be of 1 hour, and after which we will have a question and answer session to make our session more interactive. We encourage the members of the panel to keep their cameras on during the session. Also, keep your microphones on mute unless you are speaking. The session will be recorded and will be released later on Cuts International YouTube channel. The link for the same will be posted in the chat box. It is encouraged that the audience members post their questions to the moderator, indicating relevant speakers in the chat box to make the session more interactive. I now invite Mr. Pradeep Mehta, Secretary General, Cuts International, for his opening remarks to start the session.
Thank you, Yatika, and a very good morning to all of you. Welcome to this webinar, which has already been described in brief by Yatika. Other than the fact that this is a significant day, May Day, Labor Day as such. And if you go back to 1886, so the May the 4th, in fact, in Chicago, the violent confrontation took place in the Haymarket. It began as a peaceful rally in support of workers striking for an 8-hour workday. Now, we do know that workers are considered the backbone of the economy as much as consumers are, and yet are the most neglected. Now, in 1889, 3 years later after the Chicago incident, the May 1st was declared as May Day as a symbol for workers' rights across the world. In the present scenario, digital economy is transforming the world of work. Over the past decade, the expansion in broadband connectivity, along with the innovations in information and communication technology and artificial intelligence, has penetrated a number of economic sectors and also resulted in increasing job opportunities. Despite the opportunities emerging through these platforms, concerns are being raised about the worker experience on such platforms. One of the key challenges facing India as it navigates the future of work is the need to address significant skill gaps in the country. While there is a large pool of young workers in India, many of them do not have the necessary and sufficient technical skills, including digital skills, which are required for future jobs. And mind you, most of these areas are expanding, developing so fast that in order to be able to cope with the kind of demands, increasing demand, may also require a different kind of thinking. So, therefore, I mean, one of the key areas that require attention is the need to upskill and reskill the workforce. And as I said, it's a continuing process. The future of jobs in 2030 is going to be demanding, and the influence of AI and automation will be very significant. Therefore, we must prepare young people for the future of jobs by instilling these skills. Thus, to engage on the issues of how we can achieve the equilibrium in the demand and supply ecosystem of the job market, Cuts has organized this webinar to engage eminent experts from the industry and other stakeholders to discuss and build understanding about the complexities of the future work and deliberate on conditions necessary for gainful coexistence of labor and technology in India in future. Let me conclude there by welcoming all our speakers, participants, and particularly our esteemed fellows, two moderators for today's events, Dr. Didar Singh and Aruna Sharma. Of course, this is not to say that don't wish to ignore anybody else, but the fact is that I think we should move forward. And what we often see is that in a packed session like this, the audience participation gets shrunk. And therefore, may I request Aruna ji and Didar ji to ensure that they are able to maintain time schedules in a way that we are able to get maximum participation from the floor, which would then be more interactive as well as more result oriented. Thank you very much. Yatika?
Uh, Thank you, Mr. Mehta. Now, I hand over the reins of this webinar to our moderator, Dr. Aruna Sharma, former Secretary, Electronics and Information Technology, and Distinguished Fellow, CUTS International, who would introduce our panel and take the session forward. Over to you, ma'am.
Right. Thank you so much. And taking the cue of how we have to manage the time, what I thought I'll make a brief opening remarks for 2 minutes and request each of the panelists. I introduce them, and each of the panelists, maybe I'll throw up a question and request you to restrict to 7 minutes. And from there, we take up the questions from the audience. And in the end, you can have 1 minute to wrap up, and I'll do the closing remarks. So I think that should fit into the scheme of things, and we can do a better time management. The topic given to our panel is changing nature of economic growth and job opportunities in India. It's a matter of great concern because we are ending up with an economic growth. So even if we debate whether our growth is going to be 5%, 6%, or 7%, we are having a danger of a jobless growth. And that is a point of worry when we have a young India where nearly a huge percentage of population is seeking for the jobs, and our unemployment rate also by various statistics which are coming forward ranges from 6 to 8%. So definitely with the automation coming, and pandemic has accelerated the growth of automation in all major manufacturing industries, and we need an entire reskilling of the jobs. So we are going to end up with two kinds of people. One who are able to be skilled along with the needs of the market today, and the other lot who are not capable of being skilled to that level, and we have to find jobs for them in the service sectors maximum, which is not a very healthy way of doing, because service sector does not give a consistency of job. We have seen it now happening very often, and it also does not allow them to enhance their income levels matching to the inflation. So that is a point of worry. So that's why this is one thing which I will request each of the panelists to focus upon, as to how do we have an economic growth by creating job opportunities. And here I throw up an idea that entire skilling ministry, where the skilling is being given, can we attach this skilling to the manufacturers, MSMEs, instead of having a siloed way of skilling them, because they may be better employable and better ones who can move ahead with it. The second issue I would like to flag about the 4 labor codes, a very good movement, but a non-starter. The question is not if it is going to happen now, the question is when it is going to happen, because the government of India is looking for a consensus, and that's a problem. Then there are 3 problems into the labor code, where the floor wages is being talked about, decided by center, whereas each state has its own mechanisms looking at the inflation rates, looking at the cost of living to decide the floor wages. So that is a matter of concern. And similarly, the category now what we have, what has been rightly mentioned by Mr. Mehta in digitization, is recognizing part-time jobs, multiple jobs with different owners, and a work from home. So these are the major challenges which are available. And today on a Labor's Day, it is very important that the labor metamorphosizes itself to the going sector. So with these kind of opening remarks, I invite Bornali Bhandari, who is Professor of National Council of Applied Economics Research. She is a professor at NCAER, and definitely the right person, because she has an expertise in international economics, macroeconomics, and definitely her focus on globalization when she is growing. So my request to you is whether if you can focus upon, will globalization result or accelerate the non-job growth in India? And what are the steps you suggest to transform it into a job with job growth in India, looking into the scenario and the developments which are happening at the global scenario. Over to you, Bornali. Please go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am, for inviting me, and thank you to CUTS for inviting me to this very important seminar. Good morning, everybody. I think the first interesting question is that is globalization going to create jobs? So I'll take a step back and ask ourselves, how much time do I have? 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
7 minutes. Yeah.
So basically, the important question to ask is, what is globalization? Is globalization what we mean? It's a very famous book by Jagdish Bhagwati, In Defense of Globalization. It can have two things. It can have labor flows, it can have capital flows. And so in capital flows, we can consider including foreign direct investment, even FIIs are considered part of capital flows. Then we have labor flows, which is trade, which is immigration, again, going in both directions. And then, of course, trade in goods and services. Traditionally, when we think about globalization, we think about trade and FDI, but immigration is also very important, or immigration is also considered a very important part of labor flows. When we think about that, when we look at the evidence, empirical evidence that we have looked in the literature, trade and FDI both have known to enhance job creation. The challenge is not about job creation, but about the quality of jobs and where do you create the jobs. There are jobs that you can create, and what type of jobs do you create? And that itself is dependent on the production processes that the firms employ. Without getting into that, I mean, again, there's a lot of literature, and even within India, I think trade openness will add to jobs in India. Why? Because when you bring foreign capital in, you're bringing take the example of FDI, you're going to set up a new plant. When you set up a new plant, you're going to hire people in the plant. But it's not just about what you're doing within the factory, because it also has external spillovers in the terms of when people move into a particular place, or then they will look for houses. So they are looking for houses in the same. Then you need support staff. So jobs have external spillovers. Plus, of course, when you are sourcing your inputs from India, there are backward channels who are also supplying work. When I was looking at the literature, I had visited Sri Perumbudur in Tamil Nadu, and what I found is that there are foreign major auto factories around in Chennai, in Sri Perumbudur, but it's guess who's supplying the lunches? It's the panchayats around the area which are supplying lunches. Panchayats also earn money from that foreign direct investment, when these plants set up. So there is an all-round development that takes place when foreign direct investment comes in. The trade of goods and services. There's a lot of noise on trade and services, because of course, India is doing quite well on trade and services. Traditional services has been one of the dynamic sectors, and after the pandemic, it has now picked up speed and momentum. Trade in goods is also, it has its ups and downs, but trade in goods can also create jobs. Now, the question that arises is, yes, you're creating. Then the second question is, but somebody will ask is, but there are always losers. There are people who are not benefiting. What about our traditional people who lose jobs or who don't have the skills? Yes, there's a problem. When you have a problem like that, yes, there'll be in trade, we know that there are some gainers and some people who don't gain from the process. So the gainers is one thing, but then how do we ensure that the people who are not gaining from the process, how do we ensure that they get in the process? So think of, and this is true for technology also, trade and technology both. So the way to think about, there are two options for us. One, of course, we have created a fantastic system on the direct benefit transfers, where we can use that mechanism to actually provide social support to people, at least for a short time anyway, to support them through the transition process. We call it the structural unemployment. And if there's and if your one's skills are completely not needed, they are like a typist. You don't need those typist skills anymore. Then what you need to do is upskill them, either bring them into computers or reskill them so that they can do other things along with the existing technology. So reskilling and upskilling becomes very, very important along with that. So it's not just a new skilling we are talking about, not just the people who are getting out of school and colleges and getting them skilled and trained, and it's the existing workforce whose skills are no longer needed, need to be upskilled and reskilled. So we need a combination of social welfare support. We have a system for that and skilling to work with that. Again, the government has plenty of mechanisms for skilling and upskilling, and of course, also a third point that I just want to say is just based on the work that we have done at NCER, that we have to go away from the challenge of lifelong employment to lifelong skilling. We have to know that it's a continuous process. No, but it's easy for us to academics to say that's a continuous process because that's what we're doing continuously. But it is. But how do you say that? How do you translate that? How do you prepare your workforce for the future? And it's sort of when you think of the needs of the future of the 21st century, of the fourth industrial revolution, it starts from now, because it takes 15 years for people to have the appropriate set of skills in the future. So if you think of those kind of skills, then that means, again, we come back to schooling, and we have to ensure that our foundational skills at the schooling level is strong, is adaptive, teaches children to have not only have very strong foundational skills, but also teaches them to have adaptive learning processes. So in a nutshell, I think globalization is I think in the Jagdish Bhagwati said in defense of globalization, it is not the globalization is a problem. Globalization is a process. It is up to us to create those domestic changes which enables our labor force and our capital to adapt to the changes that's happening around us dynamically. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bornali, for flagging a very, very important issue, that when we are talking globalization is unescapable. We have to be a part of the entire process to our advantage. Our problem is that India is having the age dividend at a very, very critical time when we are shifting to the automation and AI and these kind of techniques, which will require less and less of manpower. So we have to be constantly innovative by dividing into reskilling, lifelong skilling, what you have very correctly flagged. And the second thing is, for those who are not able to reach that level, it should not restrict to Manrega in terms of wages. We have to take them to the next level where they are able to enhance the income or shift the food processing kind of industries so that wealth goes to the hinterlands. And that is what is going to make a difference. Our problem is that we have to create nearly 8 million jobs every year. And I think 80 million jobs every year. 80 million jobs every year. And with that kind of a requirement, with the skilling has to be accelerated, and people will have to gear themselves. You did flag an issue of social security. Now, social security, we have to think beyond than just giving temporary advantages. What is important is to have and ring fence them about aging, about their pensions, and about their health and their children's education need. This expenditure will also have to go up through the labor monitors, through the labor departments, who has to ensure that this kind of a scenario we are able to create in. From this, I would like to go to Farzana Afridi, who is dealing with all statistics and numbers to help us, to help each one of us to appreciate whether we are in the right direction or we need a major harakiri or a major changes, or sometimes maybe a major somersault. She is with the Economics and Indian Statistical Institute in Delhi. And most important, she heads the digital platforms in the WEE program. To you, Farzana, uh, I will like you to focus upon that what I was mentioning, that unemployment rate going up and people not seeking the jobs or people not even applying for the jobs. And agricultural land is shrinking, like us of the population, they cannot depend on. It is having a very major social impact and number of jobs in real term. What kind of jobs we'll have to create based on your statistic experience year on year? Because it's not like a one stroke thing or once in a 5 years thing. It has to be created year on year, because not just the new numbers join in, many may lose jobs. We have to find alternate jobs for them. Over to you. Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Sharma. So can I just share my screen because I want to show some
I think the
statistics.
organizers should help her to.
Yeah, no, I can share it.
You can. Go.
Yeah, here. Can you see my screen? Just 1 minute. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I can.
I'm sharing my screen. So it should be visible. Okay. So I think I'll start with a little bit of a background also. And since you said, I'm in the ISI, so we deal with a lot of numbers. So we are used to at least, giving some context and showing some numbers. So we wanted to start with looking at, where the labor market was in 2019 and what happened during COVID. Many of us, of course, we've been dealing with it and aware of it, but also bring it back to the present. So, we look at this graph on the left over here, we're looking at the portion of people employed. So this is from the CMIE data. And what we see essentially is that there was a big dip and then there was some sort of a V-shaped recovery. And this happened both in urban as well as in rural areas. And also another important thing to look at is what happened by gender. And given the very low level of participation of women in the labor market, the fall, the dip, the shock that they experienced during COVID was less conditional on being employed. And it was much greater for men because the level of labor market participation of men was, of course, much higher. But also what is interesting to point out over here is that if you look at the gender gap is very high. And we're all aware of the fact that labor force participation of women is very low. So what happened after COVID? So if we look at, the last quarter or maybe not, the last quarter of the calendar year of 2021, then what we have data on, again, following from CMIE, is that, as I said, there was a V-shaped recovery and the employment did pick up. But as you can see here, when you look at these red dashed lines, the pre-pandemic employment rates were not reached. Unemployment was pretty high. So we're looking at urban unemployment rates of about 8% and rural about 7%, which is higher than it was during the pre-pandemic level. And again, if we want to look at it in terms of, gender, then again, there's a very, very big gap. Of course, the CMIE also reports lower labor force participation rates for women relative to what the PLFS does, but it's still about, if you look at the PLFS, 25%, but the gaps are huge and the employment rates are pretty, they did recover, but did not recover all the way back to the pre-pandemic levels. And a discourse that we've been going through has also been discouraged workers and workers dropping out of the labor market because they've not been able to find work. So the unemployment rates, particularly true for women, is much higher than it is for men. So what we have in the past 2 years or so, we're not talking about 2022, but going up until the last financial year, 2021-22, there was a sharp, we've had recovery, but the employment rate continues to be below pre-COVID, and there is somewhat more adverse effect we know of the pandemic in the urban areas, and we are dealing with historically high unemployment rates. So, basically the pandemic has compounded the low levels of job creation and the historical unemployment rates that we've had, and it's become not only persistent, but probably larger. I'm going to skip over these slides, which were looking at, what was happening in particular in Delhi, where we had data that we collected for 3,000 individuals in urban Delhi. But basically the story that we get from here is that there was a big shock, not just in terms of the fact that people were not currently employed, and there was a recovery, but also a shock in terms of earnings. So the reported working status fell by a huge amount and has remained lower, at least in 2021, was lower by 31 percentage points relative to pre-crisis. And it also remained lower for women. And there was a big dip in earnings, 61% for men and 85% only of the pre-crisis earnings they were getting. And so what we have to think about, so this population that we sampled were essentially vulnerable population, low-skilled population in urban areas, which are primarily engaged in informal work. And so one of the things that we have to take into account is the fact that the lack of jobs available and the loss in earnings, and not just the skills that these people have, can worsen income inequality over time. And that is becoming an issue in India, definitely. So if you want to look at, I wanted to bring this into the context of, okay, where does India stand relative to other countries? So historically, we have very low levels of labor force participation. If we compare ourselves to Bangladesh or we compare ourselves to China, we often compare ourselves to China, but Bangladesh is doing much better than India on many fronts, and that's because of the huge increase in manufacturing sector and the exports. And so what you see here is that, we have about less than 50% of our labor force or of our population, the potential working age population engaged in the labor market. And this gap seems to be increasing over time. And primarily that is driven by the fact that women's labor force participation in India is falling off. And as I pointed out to you earlier also, that the unemployment rate amongst women, and many of the discussions that we've had and the work that I've done over the last few years, is trying to understand what can bring women back into the labor market. So we've had this huge increase in the unemployment rate. A lot of it is also driven by these gender gaps and the gender differences that we see. We've had recovery, but again, the unemployment rate, as I pointed out to you, is higher than it was before the crisis hit us. So I think so that's the overall picture that we have in terms of the fact that we don't have, that we are moving into a period where the urgency of creating jobs is very, very, immediate. But also, I think, we talked about it, it was referred to in the opening remarks, that when we look at the proportion of workers who are earning wages through salaried work, then that again is very low in India. We know that the majority of our workforce, 87%, and more so for women, more than 90% of the women who are working are in the informal sector. And as you can again see here that, the contrast, India is catching up, but not fast enough in terms of providing formal sector good jobs, as we would call it. So the majority of, if you look at the PLFS data here, then the male self-employment has also been going up. And this is again in the context of what we just talked about. The structural change that is happening in India in terms of the movement away from agriculture towards a non-agricultural sector means that we should see a decline in self-employment in agriculture. and a transition to the non-agriculture, non-farm sector. And the work that, and unfortunately, I mean, and interestingly enough, we are not seeing that, at least not in these figures that we have over here, because a lot of the self-employment, and primarily when you look at women, majority of women who are working are in the rural areas where we have high labor force participation rates of women. And also they are mainly considering themselves as self-employed in agriculture. So what is happening here, despite the fact that, you know, we have this transition going from agriculture to non-agricultural jobs, is probably informality and self-employment in the urban areas, in the informal services sector. And which again tells, brings us to the concern about what are the quality of jobs people have and how do we ensure that we can help them transition to well-paying jobs, which also provide certain minimum benefits and basic work conditions. And so, so relative to other countries, we seem to be falling off. I mean, if you look at Bangladesh, again, why we are talking about it again and again, is the fact that we have this big gap that we see in the manufacturing sector, which Bangladesh was able to leverage in terms of increasing the workforce participation, especially for women. So the structural shift that we are seeing away from agriculture is transitioning into informalization and lack of good jobs and decent work, and people and women in particular dropping out of the labor market, but the ones who are staying are not doing the kinds of jobs that is ideal for them. So the question then arises is, of course, as the discussant pointed out, that we need about 8 million jobs a year to be created. And there was a recent, I think, McKinsey report in 2020, which talked about the need for 90 million jobs by 2030 that India needs to create. We also have the population increasing. It's going to continue to increase for the next few years in terms of before it starts aging. So we have a huge, not just an opportunity, but more importantly, a responsibility to this generation to engage them productively. So labor-intensive growth and job creation essentially remains central, and particularly we're looking at a time when the external demand in terms of exports is weakening. And I'm currently a senior fellow at the National University of Singapore, and Singapore is one of the big exporting countries and of course a developed country, again, where the concerns about exports is becoming very, very salient in the discussions here because of the external market that we see. We touched upon the fact that we need reforms in labor laws, but it is a state subject, so that requires consensus. The government has come up with production-linked incentives and is trying to attract a lot of manufacturing outside India to set up big manufacturing plants. And the hope is that this would create jobs. But we talked about skilling, and that is a big concern in India. So it's not just the fact that we need to get people skilled, but also how do we do it? We have a traditional the ITIs and so on and so forth, but the private sector is also moving in a big way. For example, there have been a lot of interactions between the Odisha government and, for example, the Singaporean government in setting up skilling institutes in skill certification. So a lot is the infrastructure exists, but we know about the concerns with the skilling ecosystem, particularly when it comes to the ITIs, for example, when it comes to the infrastructure, the courses that are available, the cost in the private sector is much higher. So the role of digital platforms, so to speak, as these are entering into the market, and India is a growing market for digital platforms, we have to be very cognizant of the fact that these are not necessarily going to solve the job creation problem, because they are going to address issues related to lowering job search costs, particularly for women, aligning with job preferences because they want flexible jobs, hyperlocal options, and so on and so forth. But when we look at where the growth is in the digital labor markets, a lot of it, for instance, is delivery services, for example, which again, when it comes to delivery, women are, most women do not have these skills. We've been talking to skilling centers, trying to address the issue of occupational segregation of women, moving women away from the traditional jobs that they're doing towards delivery, towards these new age technology jobs. But how do we incentivize the women to take up these jobs? What are the reasons why they are not willing to get themselves skilled, to make themselves attractive for these jobs? There are multiple reasons for that. And I can't dwell into that right now because I should stop probably. But I think I would leave that for the next panel to discuss. But thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Farzana. You have picked up the right kind of statistics to highlight the concerns that not just we are going for lesser employment, because during pandemic, all the major manufacturers, that is the big scale corporate manufacturers, they were on the drawing board to go for automation and reduce the impact. So even if there is an FDI, even if there is an investment, it is not going to be an equal multiplication of jobs. It will be lesser people and more automation. So that is the direction it is going in for. Where you have talked about, the excellent example you have picked up of Bangladesh. Bangladesh growth is manufacturing. I will like to highlight this very much, that we are forgetting the MSMEs by providing them working capital, easy access to loan for expansion, because a lot of closures of MSMEs have taken place if you look at the statistics pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And that is where the job creation happens. They can train the people, they can absorb the people in the market. Service sector is always a matter of worry because it's an off and on job. They will be with jobs, they may disappear with the job and leads to a lot of migration. So we have states like UP and Bihar constituting nearly 25 to 28% of the population of India with lesser job opportunities. So in the sense, internal migration is also getting triggered off. So what you have brought it out very beautifully is that constantly we have to be in the drawing board and not run with the numbers, but literally target and see whether our young population is getting a good sustainable jobs and the new kinds of jobs which will be there for a longer time. So thank you so much. Now, of course, I may move to Samar Verma, who is working with the Ford Foundation, and the advantage with him is that his portfolios on public interest technologies, a very interesting terminology, and of course, concern about the future of workers. And there is a word of philanthropy. I will like to understand, and I will request you to also distinguish between CSR and philanthropy. CSR is not philanthropy. It is to trigger your business. And he is with the leading thinking tag. So the basic question I'm looking forward to you is the labor codes. Excellent job. You have collapsed more than 1,000 labor acts and labor things into 4 labor code. But like I said before in the opening remarks, it's a non-starter. And will it resolve the worker issue? Because it is giving a liberty to the number of hours of work can be 8 hours plus. It can be anything. And whether it is taking care of a new kind of emerging technologies, the new skillings that will be required to a new way of job that is happening. What Farzana has very beautifully brought in, that we have not reached the pre-pandemic level, which was actually not a very happy level. So there may be statements coming that, okay, India is a bright spot with 6% growth rate, 8% growth rate in coming 10, 20 years. But it's continue at a low base, and the concern is going to be, it has to support a huge population on a non-land-based kind of an activity by, of course, going for the MSMEs and processing. How we are going to steer this? Because as has been shown also, the middle class is also shrinking. So demand is also shrinking. So how do we create that virtuous cycle instead of a vicious cycle? Over to you, Samar.
Thank you very much, Aruna ji, for reserving the most difficult question for me to answer. Not that I know how to do it, but I'll make an effort to share some of my own viewpoints. But I just wanted to first of all convey my very warm greetings and good morning to everybody on the webinar today, and also extend my gratitude particularly to Cuts and to all my co-panelists for having raised some excellent points and bringing numbers and research into our thinking, which I think is very, very important, especially in today's day and age where WhatsApp is acquiring the status of a university. I think it's important to highlight the importance of what we've always learned as evidence and facts, as opposed to what sometimes is getting circulated these days. Having said that, let me also, ma'am, just mention that whatever I say is these are my personal views. They're not representative of Ford Foundation at all. Ford Foundation does not take positions on any of these issues. I'll probably talk about philanthropy towards the end, because in some ways it's partly related, but also partly unrelated to the specific question that we intend to discuss. And I'll try and keep my remarks within 6 minutes. So, let me begin by talking about, you highlighted the importance of MSMEs, the importance of manufacturing. It's very interesting, ma'am. I know this because I've been teaching my daughter economics in NCERT books. So in some ways, it's taken me back to those books which I must confess I never read when I was in school. And I'm only beginning to read now as parent. It's interesting how service sector is defined in these books. Service sector is defined as a sector that exists to service agriculture and manufacturing, which is why it is called service sector. And I think there is a very important lesson here, which goes back to the point that you were making about importance and critical importance of manufacturing, and therefore role of MSME on that. Let me also say that I was looking at some of the numbers around, when thinking about labor codes and a large number of government schemes and incentives that have been provided. I was looking at the numbers of workers registered on e-Shram portal. It's very interesting to see, and not that we'll be surprised, but sometimes these evidence, when presented as numbers, speak a story of themselves. So of the about 278 million workers who are registered on e-Shram portal, more than 94% of them earn less than rupees 10,000 a month. Number one. Number two, more than 3/4 of them belong to marginalized communities, SCs, SPs, OBCs. Another interesting, and I think a very stark fact, which again has been brought up by panelists and yourself, is 62% of this 277 million people belong to the age group of 18 to 40 years. That's the most productive period of life. So in some ways, it talks about, it goes to the question of to what extent are we using the demographic advantage, the dividend, as opposed to wasting it. And then, of course, 52%, nearly half of them are females. Now, when I contextualize this in the context of home-based workers, and allow me to share a few statistics on home-based workers, because it's come up only recently that there is some estimates of home-based workers globally and for South Asia and a few other continents. I was in Nepal attending a first global conference of home-based workers. It's called Home-Based International, last week. And for the first time, based on a lot of surveys and research that they did, they came up with these numbers, which is very striking. So first of all, it's striking to note that there are 260 million workers globally who qualify as home-based workers. It's interesting to keep, kind of compare this number. So OECD study, for instance, when it was looking at how technology is going to impact workers, the numbers it came up with recently is 210 million people across 32 countries are vulnerable to technology disruption. So it came up with 210 million. That has created so much news and so much discussion. Yet we have 260 million people who are home-based workers, most of whom are under no protection of any laws. Perhaps BDN and Cigarette Workers Act is perhaps the only exception, but they are completely outside the purview. So let's not even talk about wages and skills and social security and lifelong employment, etc., etc. Again, 86% of these women, these 260 million people, are in developing countries, and 2/3 are in Asia. 98% of them are informally employed. Now, these are very stark numbers that are staring at us, particularly at a time when the demand is weakening, the middle sector is shrinking in terms of its purchasing power, inflation is high and it's not likely to be going down anytime soon. And given the status of joblessness, there is a tendency for change in behavior of expenditure. People are preferring to save more than was the case perhaps pre-COVID times. Now, in this kind of a scenario, and I just wanted to bring this to the table because I think it's important to convey the gravity of the situation with the numbers. Now, with these kind of numbers, what is it that we can do? And here I'll just submit a few thoughts and few things that we are trying to do from Ford Foundation, and also things that I am aware of because of the place where I sit. I will also bring in some of my own experience of having worked in a textile industry not too long ago, where I saw how automation and use of robots then about 20 years ago changed the nature of skilling, it changed the nature of workforce, but I also saw how the companies took the responsibility of ensuring that skilling happens, not because I believe there was a change in heart, but because it was in their own interest. It was in their own growth interest to do so. And I think that's one of the important incentives that we will have to keep in mind, no matter what regulations, no matter what changes we are talking about. These incentives are here to stay. Bornali was talking about globalization, trade, technology, and how it is creating jobs, but it's also creating losers. And I think the issue of incentive becomes very, very important here. On the regulations in general, with labor code being part of it, I wanted to share just one example of Germany has just come out with a law in January of this year called Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, where the business and workers' interests are being brought together in some way to make sure that what is good for business is also good for workers, and what is good for workers is also good for business. In other words, it goes back to what is the, if I may say, the headline for CUTS program, under which this webinar is happening, which is, responsible business is also good business, and that's what they're doing now. One of the critical things there, and I think it's something for us to learn, is particularly because we are a federal country. If I could put it in a broad manner, I would say an important question is how public is public policy making. So, we often say this is a public policy, but I think the processes of publicness of the policy is a critical parameter, particularly in a federal context where a lot of labor codes lie in state subject. That has to be combined with power of strong institutions which implement these laws, and that's where I think Aruna ji, as you were sharing, perhaps the importance of why it's a non-starter becomes so stark. But given the time constraint, allow me to just say two other things. One is, I think it's important to step back and look beyond just being reactionary. It's important also because what Bornali talked about, skilling beginning from school as opposed to being an afterthought, which currently seems to be the case. If we are looking at schooling as a means of skilling, then we have to anticipate what's going to happen 15, 20 years from now, and not just react on the basis of chatbots and AIs and chat GPTs and stuff like that. One of the challenges I see is that most of us, whether in think tanks or in civil society or in government or elsewhere, are looking at specific dimensions of the challenge. What I think would be important is for us to actually think beyond and big in terms of what is the world that we want to create. And in some ways, it goes back to a clarion call that we heard a lot of, and which seems to be now falling off the cliff, is, are we really going to build the world back better? Now, the building back better was so much heard soon after COVID and during COVID, but it seems to be tapering off. And I think that's the big message that I wanted to also convey for ourselves, including us. We don't want to lose the sight of building back better where no one is left behind, as DG says. And therefore, it's important to go beyond a top-down approach and look at bottoms-up approach. And again, I want to highlight our relationship and partnering with Cuts on this particular project, where we're trying to understand what are the practices on the ground. What do we know from the way industries operate? What do we know from the motivations of workers as part of supply chain, both formally and informally, in order to then inform the policy making, which keeps the interest of workers at heart of policy making, as opposed to as a recipient of benefits. That is one thing that I wanted to say. And the third and the last thing I wanted to talk about is, in the context of economic growth, we are still, I think, in some ways, prisoners of thinking of economy as a linear model. So, we start from raw material, we go through processing, we end up with a finished product, and that's the end of the matter. I think it's important to start thinking a little bit more circular, particularly because we now know what it means if we stop the chain at consumption. Irresponsible consumption is leading to so many kinds of challenges and problems. And the worst affected of those challenges and those problems that consumer is creating are precisely the people that we are trying to help through a thinking platform like this. So I think, my plea to this group is that we need to go beyond that linear model of thinking and start thinking, how do we look at consumption not as an end product, but perhaps as part of an integration of a concept of economy which is more circular. Start thinking of human being as a source, as the source of all resources that we get created, as opposed to human resource, which we are so kind of trained to think. But let me stop here for the moment. But thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Samar, for bringing out very, 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 very important issue. That is the skilling, the right kind of skilling has to start off young. And it is not something etched in rock. It has to be a dynamic process. Constantly, we have to be in a drawing board and look forward as to what kind of skilled manpower we need. I remember in early 90s, Vietnam, when I was visiting them, they were working about that, okay, 5 years down the line, we need welders. 5 years down the line, we need X kind of skilling, Y kind of skilling. And the admissions that particular year were done in those courses. We don't have that thinking. I think what one generation learns, the same thing is getting repeated in every generation when time has gone. And it's not new to us. When India started formulating or India started growing, we did sort of link ourselves to what India needed at that time. We needed technically trained people, we needed doctors, we need agriculture scientists to fight the famine, and we created that kind of a population. I think we have to again rework on those lines of creating jobs and ensuring sustainable jobs. Thank you so much for bringing. We still have around 15 minutes with us. So I think we can take up some questions, and after that, in the order, first I'll request Samar Aruna, followed by Ms. Bornali, and followed then by Farzana to make the final remarks of 2 minutes each before I wrap up. So any questions, please switch on and speak it out, or you can type it out in the chat box where the panelists can sort of group them together and say so. So anybody there, please just switch on your mic and shoot the question. Please go ahead. Anybody there? Vartika, are you able to get some questions? Because I don't see any in the chat box. No? I think
No,
no. Okay, so looks like everybody has been very convincing to the audience, or the audience has been put off to sleep, either of the two. But taking advantage of that, what I'll request is that you can, each one of you, can now make your final closing remarks on a way ahead. I see one. No, it's Samar Verma's thing only. I'm aware did not respond to your specific question on. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
No, it's perfectly all right.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I just wanted to.
Yeah. No, I was just reading that.
Yeah.
I thought somebody has popped up a question. Right. So what I suggest is each one of you take a 4-minute each, focusing on way forward. Because the problems we are aware, our experiments, some of them have succeeded very well. We need a little harakari. We cannot continue what we were doing today and be happy with the 6, 7, 8% GDP in case we continue to achieve it year on year. There has to be a harakari. It has to be inclusive growth. Inclusive sustainability is the key words. And for that, what kind of a job creation we can do is something we have to look forward. So first, let me take up Samar. Please go ahead.
Sure, thank you, ma'am. It's as I said, I don't think any of us really knows the kind of all things that need to be done. But I'll just offer some of my own thoughts on this based on what we are currently doing. So one is, as I said, I think it's important to anticipate and prepare for the world as opposed to react to the world that is being thrown to us. So AI, chat GPT, innovations, disruptions, automations are known to us. Things that we know is happening. There is studies which is being done by OECD's, McKinsey's, think tanks here, which are talking about the impact it already has or is having on us. But what we still need to do, and this in some ways speaks to very strongly to the opportunity. It's very, very opportunistic for us and also responsible, as Farzana said, on us, given the kind of educated unemployment, given the kind of unemployment, especially at the most productive time of one's life that we are experiencing, and likely to experience over the next few years. It's incumbent upon us to make sure that we anticipate that future for us, not just anticipate a future for the formal economy, because a lot of these automations, technology, etc., is limited to 10, 15, 20% of the economy at most. What we are not talking about yet is the invisible part. Sorry, you're on mute. You're saying something? Okay. So that's one. I think it's important to, and that's where the role of NCIRs and ISI and others become extremely critical. So anticipate the future and prepare for it is the first. Second is, for people who don't have food in stomach today or a job today, will not wait for 10, 15 years for us, and rightly so. So we need to have some kind of a, if I may say, protective legislation for this group of people. Now, labor code is one example. In my view, it's difficult in a country like India to have any one legislation at the center which will meet the specific needs of every state or every region or community 100%. However, if we are able to at least agree on the right path forward and then are willing to adjust the policy as we go along, because a lot of the experience as the rubber hits the road, so to speak, should inform the way policies also shape up. So that flexibility, so we take the first step, but we have retained the flexibility to adapt the policies, whether they are labor codes, whether they are codes about, relevant to states or relevant to specific industries. That I think should be the second thing. And the third is what, we have called it in a specific program that we support, but we could perhaps have something along the lines of what could be called as a livelihood stabilization fund. This takes care of two things. One is structural or frictional unemployment. Bornali was talking about the structural unemployment, which I think is going to be part of all the disruption that we are seeing today and tomorrow. But also, it will take care of, so you could think of, a stabilization and reskilling or skilling fund. The key question here is not creating that fund. I think the key questions are two. One is, what is the source of funding for this? Now, if we were to expect that the government alone will provide for funding, then frankly, I think it's a wrong direction to go. And this is where, Aruna, if I may bring in the specific question you asked to me. Philanthropists, especially in India, given that we have a unique position where the amount of philanthropic funding, and I don't talk about CSR, so I'm keeping CSR aside, family philanthropy, corporate philanthropy is really on the rise. Many people may not know, but in 20th century, the largest philanthropist in the world was not Gates or Rockefeller or Ford. It was our very own tax. But and a lot of these institutions have been created through domestic funding, through Ford Foundation, etc. And I think it's important to have that perspective in mind. So the first question is, how do we get philanthropists and to come in and pool the funds? And second is the reskilling and the upskilling that needs to happen. Who should be responsible for identifying the skills? Typically, governments are normally not the best group of people to be able to do that job because it's so market driven that it ideally should be left to industries and industry associations to come up with those kind of skills of the future, which then can be funded through some kind of through a pool like this. But let me stop here and thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Samir. Thanks a lot. I think Farzana has to go in 5 minutes, so I will ask 4-minute comments from Farzana and then come to you, Bornali. Right? Over to you, Farzana.
Yeah, thank you so much for accommodating me. Sorry, I have to leave in about 5 minutes. I think I'll be very short and I'll reiterate what I said in my presentation. I think number one, we need to focus on creating jobs in the manufacturing sector. I completely agree with Ms. Sharma's point about focusing on MSMEs, the credit that they require, the support that they require, because those are the basically the bulwark of the job creation in our economy, and they have suffered a lot during the pandemic. So we need redoubling of effort there. The second is the government is already putting a lot of effort in trying to create manufacturing sector, large-scale employment through foreign direct investments. We've seen factories coming up, Foxconn, and so on and so forth. But that requires also skilling of our labor force and a certain accompanying, the improved labor laws, which allow us to tap fully into the potential of our labor market, of our labor force. And so that's number. So I think focusing on MSMEs, but also at the same time attracting investments from outside. We do need to focus on domestic demand, at least in the short run, not in the long run, but in the short run, given that the external market is looking very weak. How do we ensure that we continue to grow at a high rate that we will have to depend substantively on domestic demand? And for that, we require growth within the economy. And there's this virtuous circle. If you have jobs, you have income, you demand, and then the rest of the economy grows. And last point I would make is about women in the labor market. And from the figures that I showed you, basically, we can see that the overall labor force participation rate, engagement in our economy is much lower than it is for other countries, middle-income countries like Bangladesh, for example, which is our closest neighbor, precisely because women are not engaging. And that is a huge, huge loss, because by some estimates, our GDP growth can be multiple percentage point times higher than it is currently if women were engaged. So when we create manufacturing jobs, we also need to create an enabling infrastructure around those manufacturing jobs, which means transport, public infrastructure, safety, and all of these accompany in getting women from where they are to the jobs which are being created in the factories, in the manufacturing sector. So unless we create that enabling environment to get them out of their homes, we are going to not be able to take advantage of a demographic dividend completely, because more than 50% of our labor force would not be engaged. So those are just my main points. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Over to you, Bornali. And there are two questions here. Can you see in the chat box in case you would like to address them also in your say? Otherwise, I'll take it up in the wrap-up.
Yeah. So I just want to say that I want to emphasize this point. I mean, I was trying to respond to the question that was posed to me, but emphasize this point as a macroeconomist that we need economic growth. It's a necessary condition. It's not a sufficient condition, yes, but it is a necessary condition. We need jobs. So you have to look at both the demand and the supply sides. It's not about just, of course, we need higher growth, and of course, we need the type of growth is very important. We spoke about Bangladesh, but the crux of the point there in Bangladesh, why did Bangladesh grow, or why was Bangladesh able to provide jobs? The reason is because it was able to produce textiles and was able to export them. So it's not closing off the economy is not the answer. Globalization is the answer. A third point I do want to emphasize is that it is absolutely, it's that when we look at trade and FDI, and here I actually want to talk about the green jobs that was mentioned here in the question. When we look at impact, it's not just, as Samar is very much available, very much aware of the work that we have done at NCR, and he was referring to the NCR Skills Report 18, where we spoke about this anticipating matching and acquiring matching and anticipating framework. Exactly the point that is, it's when you look at trade and skills together, or technology and skills together, or even green jobs, the point is not about just anticipating the need for skills and skilling accordingly, because you have to think in advance. But the point is that when you look at FDI, trade, or anything, we cannot just look at one industry, right? It's not about just what is the impact of trade on textiles industry. It has impact on overall economic growth, and it has impact within the industry. We have to look at the impact on other industry, both backward and forward linkages. We have that. One of the first things we have to ask ourselves is, where are the jobs going to be created? It's not just about skills. You have to ask yourself is, and do the analysis, and we have done this work, is where are the jobs going to be created? And if you know the type of jobs, then what type of skills are going to be needed for those jobs? So you have to do a backward analysis. And the other thing that I have found, and it's found for other countries, it is true for India, that when you look at FDI, because you can see a manufacturing plant right there, it is not just the impact on the industry backward and forward also, it actually has an impact on local communities. Suddenly, if you see, just drive from Chennai to Srinagar, everybody is in an international school. Everybody is trying to learn Japanese or Japanese. There are Japanese shops over. There is a spillover effect. It has been captured empirically in abroad, in US and China. Unfortunately, in India, we don't have local FDI data, so we are not able to capture it so nicely. But there are spillover effects on local communities where they can get involved in actually having a green impact. So it's a circle. Again, we come to the virtuous circle kind of community that we can talk about. And the fourth point about skilling is the point, thank you Samar for bringing that in, is the anticipating skills. We have to anticipate, we have to know where the jobs are, and the jobs are, again, it says 10-15% of the jobs. Most of the jobs are still going to be created. Clothes, shoes, textiles are clearly our sectors where we still have a comparative advantage, and we are losing that comparative advantage, by the way, because we have, there are papers by Aruna and otherwise who have shown that we are losing a comparative advantage in our traditional sectors. At the same time, we are not gaining enough advantage in other new sectors. So we are in a state of transition, you can say. I'm not getting into the good or bad, I'm just saying it's a state of transition. So in this case, we still have enough of a chance in our traditional sectors that we need to create more labor intensive jobs, as Farzana said, and it will create more, hopefully more female oriented jobs, more jobs where females can get into. But it is important also in the future that what kind of skills what kind of jobs we are going to have in the future. And this should not just do it at the macro national level. This should be done for at the state level, at the district level, because where the growth processes are tied up at a district. When we think of ODOP, one district, one product, or any other district export promotions, so you have to think about the district's comparative advantage and what are they producing now, what are they going to produce in the future, and then accordingly train in the future. It's a dynamic system that will be evolving every few years or maybe faster. So in this particular case, this situation, it's not just about now, but also in the future. That's what, and the analysis has to take place at all levels. In Tripura, there is a demand for bamboo. You may not find that in Delhi, but there is a huge market for bamboo. Are we doing that? And the fourth point is that the fifth point, sorry, is I just want to drive home this point that we have to, that MSMEs are very important. But again, we did this work which showed the supply demand side, the large firms can skill their own people, but the MSMEs are not able to skill. They don't have any incentive to skill because they know if they skill, they may lose that worker. So the skilling has to be provided, as Samar said, that it has to be provided at the industrial level, at the cluster level, where there is where industry associations and industries work together, so where people can relatively upskill and reskill themselves easily. And this cluster model has worked in Germany. Whether it will work in India or not, our industry associations are also not at that level that they could actually train their own people. So it's one thing to say MSMEs should skill, but the MSMEs have no incentive to skill. So we have to need to think through all the detailing before to actually come up with these implications. And we have done that very detailed work in our report 2018. But I'm not saying that that should be the only answer. But they're one of the many answers that we should look at. But on that note, thank you so much for inviting us. And thank you, Samar, for remembering the report. It's always good that somebody remembers your report after many years.
Thank you. Here, I would like to thank all the panelists, Samar, then of course, Bornali, who has brought in very, very important issues, and Afridi supporting it with the statistics. Now, few issues, I would like to say one point which has come up very, very strongly and clearly, that we have the red light and red alarm is red flag, whatever you call it, is there. Because our young population should not become a liability is a big challenge we all are facing. And one thing is very important, when it was talked about the MSME, what we want to advocate, that skilling fund should pay for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years for the person who is being trained by MSME. So in a way, we are subsidizing the MSME to engage these people, and they will be more employable when they are thrown in the market than that traditional Hindi film thing, kind thing of kapda silke bacche ko paal rahe. It is very, very important. And what we have, the China example, somebody has said in the question, they went for trans-village industries. This is very, very important, because in trans-village industries, one product they specialized, but marketing was taken care of by the experts. And the market feedback was real-time feedback. So, okay, this kind of shoe is not getting acceptable. This design is getting acceptable. This color is not getting acceptable. And that research and correction was done immediately, so that they were able to flood the market and create an employment at the back end. And that is what made the whole difference in China, when they were number one in population by engaging as many people as possible in the productivity. In a decentralized approach, we have an example, agri-based kinds, growing of pudina, mint leaves. Now you sell it as a pudina, right? Or you can have a decantation plant bank in the hinterland, where you create menthol, and that menthol brings in wealth there. The women are engaged, the young boys are engaged, you create employment, you shift the wealth. So similarly, an intermediate step of food processing can easily be pushed as a policy down the line. There was a mention about Sri Perambudur area quite often, but in our fluctuating policies, we made Nokia to run away from it. And with great difficulty, we had to revive that plant, because I was involved in getting Foxconn here. So I know kitna papad belna pada tha. So that's why it is very, very important that number one, it is a dynamic thing. We have to ensure it does not become a liability. Number two, we have to be consistent, credible in our policy making when we are attracting industries to come for the investments. Number three, we have to focus on the stacking up and adding value to the agriculture produce. So what correctly was said is to shift to the decentralized way for the wealth part of it. And number four is what's most important is MSME is the only job creator. Let us be very clear in our mind. And unless until we focus on that, we are heading for disaster and create more and more liability. There was a mention about how everything coexists. Yes, it coexists. Because the more the money, the more the earnings come, the more the demand, more it goes. And why people are interested in India? Because India is a huge market. Don't forget that. At this stage, we are not a supplier, we are a huge market. So 80% of anything manufactured, if we are able to create a local demand for it, your break even is there. Then 20% export is good enough. So I think that should take care. So once again, I will like to thank Guts. I'd like to thank Samar. I'd like to thank Bornali. And of course, I would like to thank Afridi for a brilliant talk and bringing all these issues at the central table. Over to you, Varika, and to Mr. Didar Singh. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Aruna. Now I invite Dr. Didar Singh to moderate this. Dr. Didar Singh, former Secretary, Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs and Distinguished Fellow Kutch International, to moderate a session.
Thank you, Ji. Good afternoon to everybody. Let me begin by first of all congratulating Kutch. You have really chosen on the 1st of May today, you've chosen absolutely the most appropriate thing of all to focus on. And I must compliment you that you picked up the future of work, because without the future of work, there is no work, and without work, there is no dignity, and without dignity, there is no human being. So you have really chosen the right thing to focus on. Now, we are supposed to, in this second session, actually focus on skills and see where the gaps are and how they will impact the future of work in India. But in many ways, this has already been answered in the earlier session. So I don't want to repeat myself, but I will just mention some things which are of consequence to all of us to understand. First of all, we must understand that there is a problem. And that problem is that in the future of work, we are going to have a major problem of both skilling as well as of the job creation. I was in FICCI earlier, and in FICCI we did a report which showed that almost 1/3 of the jobs are going to just disappear. 1/3 will need, it's a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 is how we went about it. If you look at it in a very, very generalized manner, that 1/3 of the jobs will go away, 1/3 of the jobs will remain, and 1/3 of the jobs need to be reskilled to provide for the future. In 2022, we did a second report with NASSCOM, where it was now shown that if you look at sector-wise, you can actually identify the jobs. We were just talking about skilling. We can identify the jobs which need to be picked up and which need to be looked at and which need to be focused on. Now, we all know that this seminar today, we're looking at technology and we're looking at jobs. Please understand that technology is a given today. It is there on the global stage, and in many ways, whether it's ChatGPT or whatever, artificial intelligence, it is there. Whether we like it or not, it's always going to be there. So we have to focus on that. And my little suggestion here is that we should focus in India on the digital area. Why? Because the India stack is the single most important thing which has happened around us and which the whole world is looking at. Today, every single part of manufacturing, every single part of MSME, SME, whatever, has to be digitized. So if we just focus on that itself, that is the greatest skill that we really can impart to all our people. Having said that, all this is of no consequence unless we have basically a social security which is also guaranteed along with this. And in this context, I must bring in now Mr. Narayanan, who is from Kerala and is the president of the Bharatiya Mazdoor Sangh. He will really bring to you what he thinks is the issue regarding labor participation and labor security. So Narayanan Saab, you are representing India at the ILO, and I want you to really focus on this matter of labor force participation, which still remains very low in India compared to China and compared actually to the world average. Now, is that an issue? And having said that is an issue, the second thing I want you to focus on is productivity of that same labor partisan. labor force participation rate and its productivity. Thank you very much, Narayanan ji. Please go right ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Now, first of all, I thank the organizers for arranging such a program and taking up a very, very important subject. That is future of work. Now, profound changes are taking place throughout the world and throughout the world of work. ILO has come out with a study on what are the changes that are taking place, what are the nature of such changes, how these changes have to be approached, and what should be the role of social partners, the state, employers, etc. They have identified 3-4 changes taking place. One is an almost casualization of work. Even casualization of business also has come up. Second is a new phase of exploitation, exploitative phase of capitalism that is called supply chain. Third is new gig work that is related to gig economy, gig industries, etc. And the fourth one is Industry 4.0, which is related to new technologies, artificial intelligence, automation, robotics, etc. So it is also called a disruptive technology. So these are all some of the things that is coming up, and the future of work is dependent on all those things. So it's very important how to look at these issues especially from an Indian perspective. That's very important. Now, when we look at casualization is not only an issue of workers, because workers are paid low wages, there is no working conditions, there is no social security. These are all some of the issues. But this casualization has got an effect on the manufacturing sector also. Even the jobs are being casualized. Previously, for example, in textile industry, previously permanent employees were there who are experienced, who are skilled in the particular job. Now, those who are being recruited to the industry are totally unskilled people and low age people. That's why the industry's quality has come down. So we now find that the entire industry is being shifted to Bangladesh. So this has become a big issue. Now, a authentic study also has come from London University on this aspect, how casualization has affected India's manufacturing sector. Second is supply chain. Supply chain is the new exploitative phase of capitalism. There will be a multinational company at the apex, and there will be a chain of agencies and other things. At the bottom level are the workers. They will be working in small productive unit or workshops. So they don't have sufficient minimum wages. They don't have working condition, nothing. So these workers are totally disconnected from the apex multinational company. These are all the newly emerging work relationship coming up in the country. Another thing is gig economy. What is gig? The word gig means transient, temporary. So everything is only temporary. Even in industry will remain for only 4 or 5 years. After that, the industry has to change to another thing. Otherwise, it will not survive. Similarly, the economy also is called a gig economy. Economy also will have such fluctuations. So all those working in such system, they are also called gig workers. They also have no permanency, no job security, nothing. So these are all the things. Now comes the Industry 4.0, which is where some new technologies are also coming up. So ILO says it just got impact on the global population, especially the working population. It says there is environmental degradation. Then it affects the livelihood of a large part of the population, global population, increasing inequalities, then the first casualty of all these changes is women workers. So gender issues related to this thing. And the main drivers of these new changes are, one is globalization, second is technology. So they have raised a new slogan. It is, what is the future of work that we want? That is the slogan they have raised. For that, they have made a call to the social partners, government, employers, and workers to take up the issue and look at the new perspective. Now, as rightly you have pointed out, today's sunrise units are going to be tomorrow's sunset units. So the world is fast moving. So survival of the fastest has become the new normal. And in such a condition, it's a great challenge to trade unions to handle issues in this thing, because previously we had an era of conflict, and slowly, because of the maturity and other handling of leading trade unions, that conflicts have come down. Number of strikes have come down. Number of lockouts are also come down. But retrenchment is increasing. Closure of businesses are increasing. So change of businesses are increasing, and job security is a foregone thing. So these changes are taking place. So again, a sort of an era of conflict may arise in the field of work. That how to deal with that thing, that's a very important thing. Now coming to the issue of skilling. Now India's skill report 2018 has said that 85% of educated people are not employable. They don't have the sufficient skill for the particular job. So pre-job and on-job training requires a new type of approach. The government has taken two initiatives. One is employment generation, and second is Skill India initiative. But these two initiatives have not so far taken momentum which is expected. So we have to look into the reasons why these two things have not taken, has gained such momentum. So one thing is we have got a very large informal economy, and more than 50% are dependent on agriculture and other things, and we have got a large number of migrant workers. So they don't, when they gain some skill in the receiving host state, and when they go back, they don't get sufficient opportunities there. They don't have sufficient wage in their sending state. So these issues they are facing. Second is, our manufacturing sector is so badly managed. Then their Chinese products have captured the market. So still our manufacturing sector is crawling. That is because most of the manufacturing sector are still conducted in a jugaad way. That is the thing. So these are all coming up in the many such things have come up in the University of London SOAS studies on increasing contractualization and other things. That is there. Now, in the new labor code, the wage code has supported this skilling system, and they have divided workers into 4 categories. The first category is unskilled workers. Second is semi-skilled. Third is skilled, and fourth is highly skilled. So they have classified into 4 categories, and the wage also need to be increased gradually as skilling increases. This is a good thing. And when people are highly skilled, then the worker has got the capacity to bargain with the employer. But when they are not skilled, the employer will bargain with the workers. This is also this thing. With regard to agriculture, let us not only talk about manufacturing sector, because major activities in agriculture sector. With regard to agriculture, the major problem is there is no marketing skill. The market and the agricultural production are totally separated. So these producers are totally in the mercy of these people. So these are all some of the things. And one reason for the failure of our Skilling India initiative, that it didn't get the momentum, is they don't have sufficient trainers. That is also a big thing. Now, lastly, when we look at to the new national education policy that have come up, that is giving a lot of hope to our world of work. The national education policy, it says from 6th standard onwards there will be vocational education. So it has ambitious plans, but I don't know whether it will work. By 2025, 50% of the students will be vocationally educated. But the slow pace in which the NEP is being implemented, also something to be worried. National education policy does not have much details on what is vocational education. It is only one paragraph on implementing these things. But they say that's a good thing. There will be a reduction of formal education. People are given unnecessary formal education. So there will be learning and earning that will be there. Then workers will be connected with the local industries, etc. This is also this thing. Moreover, there will be multi-entry and re-entry by the workers. Once, if somebody is employed in the industry, he can at any time enter into the education system at various levels, from primary up to university level, post-graduation. He can enter at various levels without any difficulty. So there will be multi-entry, then re-entry, all these things can be there. So that within a span of time, we will have a sort of ready-made plug and play type of employees available in this thing. Another thing is that this NAP has envisaged is it has related education to technology also. That's also a good thing. So in that way, all schools, colleges, and universities will be in a span of time connected to this vocational education, this skilling initiative. And in that way, and finally, one more point that is good in this there are several informal trades, informal professions. They will also be certified. It's like a mason, carpenter. He is having expertise in that thing, but he may not be educated. But his skill will be certified, and he will get a certificate on that, and that will be good for getting this thing. So these are some of the initiatives it is, and the government has to implement all these things with the people's participation, then it will become a success. With these words, I conclude. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Narayanan ji. You have focused on many areas and really brought out all the problems that exist in the market and that exist in India. Thank you very much for and you made a very important point. You said skilling is not just for the future of work. Skilling is also for better negotiation with the employers. That's a very important point. It shows correct. As you have greater skills, you can negotiate better. And that will lead to greater stability, it will lead to greater participation by the labor force, it will lead to even higher productivity. Because I believe the real issue with India is the productivity of its workers. We must improve the productivity if you're going to get anywhere and be a global player. Thank you very much, Narayanan ji, for your excellent different areas that you've touched upon. And may I now request Amrat Singh ji from Cuts International, as the director there, to give us his views on how we can look at the future of work and really look at the future of the country. How do you see 10 years from now, where are we going to be? Amrat Singh ji, please go right ahead.
Good afternoon all. Thank you, sir, for allowing me to speak. I will try to respond to you. As far as the statistics concerned, we all know, earlier speakers have also spoken on the demand-supply gap. We all know that India is failing to create enough job opportunities on the demand side, and on the demand side, professionals entering the job market are lacking in skill sets. Even the existing workforce does not have required skills to meet future demands. If we talk about some of the statistics, Manpower Group Employment Outlook Survey 2022 says that 83% of companies in India report shortage of employees with required talent. And particularly this skill gap exists in the sectors such as IT, manufacturing, construction, banking and financial services and insurance sector, wholesale and retail trades, telecom, communications, and media. And moreover, it is also lacking in entrepreneurship and related tasks like startups and all that. If we talk about specifically in some of the major sectors in IT, as we have already observed that 1.9 million tech professionals are lacking by 2026, and these digital skills are expected to increase 3 times by 2026. A survey by Skillsoft says that 66% of IT decision makers are they see skill gaps in their existing employees in their teams. So similarly, we can say in other sectors, in engineering sector, aspiring minds find that 80% of Indian engineering graduates lack the necessary soft skills. So there is lacking in the skills in the upcoming areas as well as in the existing employees to meet the industry demand. Now, how to bridge this gap? We have to take certain steps to address these gaps. And first of all, to address this, we have to identify the skills. First of all, we need to identify these skills which are currently in demand and likely to be in demand in future. This can be done through industry surveys, analysis of job postings, and consultation with experts. This India skill report is published by some of the agencies, but I think this Ministry of Skill and Entrepreneurship should take the lead in preparing annual skill gap assessment report, which can be made the basis of all the schemes, preparing the annual action plans of major flagship schemes of Government of India, such as RCT, DDV-GKY, and PMKVY. So that will be in demand with the market. Second step we can take is to develop relevant training programs with the aid of the educational and training institutes. Such programs should be designed in consultation with industry experts so that we can ensure that skills taught are up to date and relevant to the demand of the industry. Thirdly, if I say that government should also provide incentives to educational and training institutes, the industry players, so that they are encouraged to collaborate in this endeavor. And this may include tax breaks, subsidies, or grants, or other such benefits. Fourthly, if I talk about reskilling, as my previous speakers also have said about this, reskilling is very important as the skills required for future job opportunities are likely to change rapidly. And in this changing scenario, reskilling can be done by providing incentives such as tax breaks for continuing education, trainings, mid-career trainings, and exposure visits. So that can be a way of promoting reskilling. And finally, this entrepreneurship is very important to promote skilling in the country. Entrepreneurship should be encouraged, and this can be done by providing funding and support to startups, small and cottage industries and small craft-based and art-based clusters and individual artisans. All these can be supported. And also, I would like to say that our Honorable PM has called for prioritizing women-led development in G20 agenda. And we need to create gender-focused strategies and courses to improve women participation in the workforce so that we can fully reap the benefits of democratic dividend. The entire skilling ecosystem need to deploy gender-specific strategies which can involve more involvement of women traders, women trainers, the online trainings, and career guidance. All these strategies we can involve. So this is, I think, how we can tackle. And if I talk about the NEP, yes, NEP. There are certain provisions in national education policy, which is basically to bridge the demand and supply gap. It tries to align the education with the needs of industry and economy. NEP basically focuses on vocational skill trainings and multidisciplinary learning and promoting entrepreneurs. This aims to create a culture of continuing learning and encourages universities and institutions to offer flexible and modular courses to promote lifelong learning. National education policy also promotes the use of technology in education, which is very vital. And this includes online learning, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, which is basically because if we involve industry more into skilling, then we can have greater results. So this can help. And I think NEP is a step in the right direction. Although before that, we have many agencies promoted by the government in the last decade. If we see Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship was created, these skill development councils were created, and many missions in state and national level, many skill development missions were also formed, and which have created very good results. But still, now we need to assess the effectiveness of these schemes and institutions and how we can improve the performance of these. Because I'm mainly from implementation side, so I have seen these schemes from the ground, and I can safely say that there are many lacuna in the implementation. So that we need to address. If I share some insights from the field, I can say that for effectively implementing the skill development programs, we need to integrate the trainings along with the provisions of availability of finance and the industry mentorship. Because skilling alone, conducting the training cannot help until and unless the trainees are provided with finances to start their own enterprises, or industry mentorship to particularly guide them and or involve with them for fulfilling their requirements. And I'm also of the view that to make these programs and flagship schemes more effective, it is imperative to assess the performance of these schemes periodically, identify the gaps and address them with suitable modifications, which at present is very much lacking in my opinion. If I take particular examples in DDU-GKY, while the scheme is good, the monitoring and reporting requirements are such which hampers the training agencies to effectively perform. In all, there are 89 formats in the SOP, which is basically forces the training agencies to devote their most of quality resources in preparing those formats and reporting and monitoring kind of thing. While this actual conduction of training is takes the back seat. So that we can improve. And other thing is that in DDU-JKY, there is a major issue of mobilization of right candidates. In mobilization, since DDU-JKY is a rural development department scheme, and in many of the states, including Rajasthan, it is not being implemented by rural development department. In Rajasthan, it is being implemented by RSLDC, which is a separate skill development corporation. And these skill development missions do not have any presence on ground as such. They do have training partners, they do have only training centers, but to mobilize the right candidates, they do not have any presence in the field. While the states in which it is being done through SRLMs, state rural livelihood missions, they are more able to mobilize the right candidates, keep continuous touch with the community, and continuously follow up with the candidates. So these kind of improvements we need to make in the scheme. I would also like to share some examples from RCT. They are established at district headquarters. They don't, most of them do not have any satellite centers or summer camp kind of things. And these district headquarter training institutes don't even have the residential facilities. Most of them, if I talk about Rajasthan, out of 35 RCTs, only 21 have residential facilities. And in day boarding kind of thing, it is not possible for the rural youth to come over and take the training and then go back. Because they are from poor backgrounds. So we need to consider these things, that if the scheme is supporting the training and their food and accommodation facility, they should also consider the fact that they cannot come and go on a daily basis. So that can be considered. And other thing is that this RCT scheme has more than 60 courses. But the trainings, actually, if you see on the ground, they are mainly done in a very few limited courses, and which are also very traditional courses like tailoring and beauty parlor. Most of the trainings are happening in these courses. So we need to design the courses based on the skill gap assessment and on the market demand. It should not be based on the availability of trainers or convenience of training agency, which is happening at present. So that kind of improvements we have to undertake. Further, there is no pre-assessment of skills and aspirations, which lead to the dropouts during the training, dropouts after immediately after the employment. So that kind of things can be avoided if we take into consideration the aspirations of the youth and we do pre-counseling kind of thing. So that is, I think, my view. I will stop here and can come back if required. Thank you.
बहुत बढ़िया Amrat ji, thank you so much for giving so many details on the issues, and you have really been able to say how the present schemes are functioning, because ये बहुत important चीज है. And Narayan ji also raised this matter. He said that skilling program India का तो बहुत बड़ा है, मगर उसका क्या लाभ हो रहा है या उसका what is the result of that is not really at the peak and the potential that it's meant to have. So on that basis, you have further clarified and shown on the district level we are facing problems. ये बहुत आपने अच्छा बताया है, and this will really help everybody to understand. Now, may I now request, because हमारा तीसरा panelist नहीं आए हैं, तो मैं request करूँगा that anybody has any questions, we would like to address them now and see if the panelists can answer any of the questions being raised by the participants. Please. कोई बोलना मांगेगा, कोई बताना मांगेगा? Bipul ji, anything from your side?
Dr. Singh, our colleague, one of our colleagues, Sanchita Chatterjee, she's a fellow working with us. She may want to make some points. Sanchita, are you there?
Sanchita, please go ahead.
Can you hear me? All right. So thank you for letting me say a few things, just very few things. Like Mr. Samar Verma mentioned before, that CUTS is implementing a project which is looking at some of these issues, future of work and workers' welfare, how to create good and better jobs. And this has been going on, this is the second phase of the project. So the project in two phases have been going on for a few years. Now, a few things from the project findings I can share with you. So first of all, everybody's talking about requirements for skilling and all. Some survey conducted by CUTS has shown that they are different companies, and in many cases they do not receive as much benefits as skilled workers or permanent workers on payroll. And also from this point of view, they do not, many of the workers do not stay in these jobs for long. They keep on moving a lot, so the attrition rate is very high among these workers. So, there are 2 points of view. One from the employer's point of view, where they think that the workers are not stable, but also from the employee's point of view, that they do not receive as much benefits and they prefer moving these jobs, and in many cases they do not see these jobs as long term. So the question is, how do you bridge the gap between how the workers are seeing these jobs and what are the employers' requirements?
Thank you very much, Sanchita ji. We now need to focus on some other issues. So anybody else would like to raise anything, please, Ji, please go right ahead. Anybody else?
Sorry, my connectivity is a bit unstable. I don't know how much you heard me. I'm not turning on the video.
Hanji, go ahead.
So I don't know how much you heard me. I was talking about unskilled workers. Yeah. And for the project CUTS is conducting right now, which is looking at workers' welfare, future of work, good and better jobs. Under this project, a survey was just conducted of 4 sectors. And it seems for most of the companies in different sectors we have looked at, a lot of these unskilled workers are on contractual hire basis. Either they take these workers from third-party contractors, or they hire them directly, but on contractual hire basis. And in most cases, these workers do not receive same benefits as employees on payroll or permanent employees or skilled employees. And attrition rate among these workers are also quite high. And it seems, and though we did not do a survey of the workers, but from the employer's point of view, the employers are saying that these workers, a lot of them, particularly youngsters, they don't see these jobs as long-term and they keep on moving between jobs. In cases of, say, gig economy, they are involved in more than one company and sometimes they just leave without informing.
Thank you, Sanchita ji.
Haji. Yeah, sorry, the internet is not so stable. I think I managed to say a few things. I'll stop here.
Yes. We got it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Narayanan ji, would you like to conclude anything, ji, especially on women?
On the gender issue related to the changing world of work. whenever there is some crisis or some changes taking place, the first casualty are generally women. During the crisis period also, there are studies have come up that it is the women who are affected more. Second thing is that in the job, in the world of work, generally there is a sort of a stereotyped obsessive vision about women. There are certain occupations reserved for women, so they are only fit for those jobs. That preoccupied female occupations. That is a concept that's also standing in the way. There is very much in Indian context also that is very important. Such things have to be changed, and women should be skilled, and a lot of skill training is required, and they should be encouraged to come up for taking up mainstream jobs. So that training is required. But the problem with our village area, it is they have to adjust with their homework also. It's also a big issue. So their home, this working, their work at home as well as their work at workplace, this has to be harmonized. These are some of the issues related to gender. Thank you.
Amratji, would you like to add something to this women in work as well as the matter of district planning?
Yes, sir. I will share some of my views in addition to what I have already shared. To promote the involvement of women, I think we can also take initiatives in leveraging technology for skilling programs. As of now, what we are doing mainly is the brick and mortar kind of thing. And this brick and mortar based skilling programs cannot achieve the higher targets which we have set. And technology must be exploited to achieve scalability, and video-based tutorials, mobile labs, and other such innovative technologies should be leveraged so that we can promote not only the women participation, as sometimes it is difficult for them to come out and attend the trainings physically. And also we can, by leveraging this, we can also achieve the higher targets, which otherwise is becoming difficult. And also I would like to say that when doing the district level planning, we also need to create some other innovative implementation models, like as of now, what is happening is that we are focusing on individual trainings. If we are targeting rural youth and rural women, especially because it is a major area where we have not been able to do much. So what we can do is we can promote cluster-based learnings. Even if RCETs or some other agencies are providing training, we need to provide them facilities like a cluster or a common facility center kind of thing, where they can come, they can work, and since that can be scaled up, then that will be in a scale that can be linked with the market as well easily. Industry partners can come forward and provide bulk orders, and bulk supplies can be provided by these CFCs or clusters. So that can be done. And I would also like to say that we need to promote public-private partnership because it has provided good results. If I talk specifically, in Rajasthan, we have two rural self-employment training institutes run by this ICICI Bank, which are in Jodhpur and Udaipur. And as per national report of MORD, these institutes rank #1 and #2 respectively in all over India. And that is mainly because of the industry partnership and the out-of-box thinking they are doing. They are not just running the RCT skill training programs as such, but they are integrating many things in addition to that. They are integrating technology, they are integrating industry partnerships. So that kind of things should also be leveraged. That can, I think, help.
बहुत बढ़िया. Thank you so much, Amrat ji. Sanchita, would you like to add something to finish off? Any final views?
Yes. I hope the internet will not get disconnected. So for women's participation, we also know, yeah, I'll speak very quickly. We also need to look at the cultural factors. What kind of jobs are women expected to perform or generally perform in India? What kind of, family support they receive when they go out to work? Within the cultural factors, within the cultural setup, what can be done for women workers? The other thing is, you look at Nordic countries, they have provided a lot of infrastructure support and other kind of incentives for women to work, like for example, state-sponsored daycare, and parental leaves where both the parents can take parental leave of say 200 days or more than that, I think, but it can be split between both parents. So there also cultural factor comes in. How many fathers would like to take paternal leave for more than say 2 days, if at all. So, we need to look at these things as well. It's not just a matter of, availability of jobs or giving incentives for women to come and work, but we need to look at the background and support that is available for them. Thank you.
बहुत बढ़िया, Sanchita ji, thank you very much. And we don't have to go all the way to Nordic countries. If you just look at China, China का rate हमारे से 60% है, हम लोग 40% में हैं. We are 40%. China is 60% in terms of labor participation, which means that the women in China have a greater say in being able to join the jobs and to actually be part of the labor productivity matter. And that is something which India really needs to learn from and really benefit from. So on that note, may I thank all the panelists and may I thank CUTS for organizing an excellent session where we've looked at skills, we've looked at participation, we've looked at women, and we have been able to see how we can improve the future of work for India. And I'll end on my final note, which you heard me mention earlier also, that हम एक ही area पे concentrate करें. That is the digital area. That itself is good enough for us to skill ourselves and do extremely well in the future. Thank you very much for joining us and thank you for being part of this seminar. Dhanyavad, thank you and good evening.